The dead economy. Welcome. I wanted to share with you some thoughts that I've been hinting at and sort of introducing in other vlogs, but I've never really explicitly pulled them together. Essentially, it's belief that what we call the economy actually serves very little purpose. That most of us are engaged in jobs and activities that do nothing to benefit society. That maybe the function of money, the economy and jobs is to justify and hide the hoarding of resources by the few, to take us further and further away from finding God. What's more, as we move to the multiverse, that accumulation will become virtual. So any links which may have existed between the production and the creation of wealth is being severed. Dead jobs. David Graeber, one of the leaders of the Occupy Wall Street movement, published an article and then a book in 2018 claiming that few jobs actually produce anything of value. Indeed, I mean, he's dead now, but if you listen to him, he's quite humorous. You know, he will talk about having this idea from speaking to people at parties, and he'd say to them, "What do you do?" And they go, "Well, nothing really." And when he pressed them, he'd find out that they actually meant it. They did nothing of value. To his surprise, he created an avalanche of people writing to agree with him that their jobs were essentially meaningless. In bullshit jobs, sorry, I don't think I can say that word, BS jobs, you know, but that's what he calls it. He shows the productivity benefits of automation have not led to a 15-hour week as predicted by Keynes in the 1930s, but instead a proliferation of these BS jobs, a form of paid employment that is so completely pointless, unnecessary, or pernicious that even the employee cannot justify its existence, even though, as a part of the condition of employment, the employee feels obliged to pretend that this is not the case. Whilst these jobs can offer good compensation and ample free time, Graeber holds that the pointlessness of the work grates as their humanity and creates a profound psychological violence. Why? Why has this happened? Well, one of the things, you know, this is a quote that's often used, and I think its origins are obscured. I found a number of sources, but I'm not convinced by any. But using money you haven't earned to buy things you don't need to impress people you don't like. Graeber talks of 5 types of entirely pointless jobs. First of all, he mentions the flunkies. They serve to make their superiors feel important. These are the receptionists, the administrative assistants, the door attendants, the store greeters, the makers of websites whose sites neglect ease of use and speed for looks. Sorry, I used to be in one of my businesses was engaged in designing websites, you know. I have to laugh because of you know, it began with the web being this wonderful empowering thing for humanity, and it's turned into producing these corporate red sites that nobody any longer wants to use because they know they're just full of bullshit. The next type is goons who act to harm or deceive others on behalf of their employer. The lobbyists, the corporate lawyers, the telemarketers, the public relations specialists, community managers. Then the duct tapers who temporarily fix problems that could be fixed permanently, e.g. the programmers repairing bloated code, the airline deck staff who calm passengers whose bags do not arrive. The box tickers who create the appearance of something useful is being done when it's not, such as survey administrators, in-house magazine journalists, corporate compliance officers, quality service managers. And finally, the taskmasters, who create work for those who do not need it, e.g. middle management and leadership professionals. Interestingly, a YouGov poll, YouGov undertook a poll, and they found that 7% of Britain's surveys thought that their jobs did not contribute meaningfully to the world. Only half were sure that their jobs contributed. But are they simply being fooled by targets and pressure of their job, that they are busied doing nothing? Even if the job does fall into the category of being useful, then only 39% of the working day of that job are you doing what you're being paid to do. The rest is answering emails, attending to non-productive meetings, etc., etc. What's even more disturbing is, as a result of the psychopathic assumptions, our jobs are becoming less and less fulfilling. In fact, isn't the knowledge that the jobs we're doing are BS is what is driving people to foist these psychopathic assumptions on our working lives? Deadlines, meetings, targets, performance standards, and above all, the use of the word professional. You've probably not come across me having a tirade at people using the word professional. But to my mind, professional is a word only applied to what we are told is the oldest profession in the world, and to footballers. To everyone else, it has no meaning at all, except to signify that the person using it is either a psychopath or a narcissist. Gurrunkeedle, where as you know, I live, is a karst mountain range. The land itself is not very productive, but largely because the water sinks straight through it. So although it rains a lot there, the water goes straight through it, so that in the dry season it's extremely dry. But even in Gurrunkeedle, a small piece of land and a very limited amount of work can produce enough food for a family. Occasionally hard work is needed, but that's normally when something goes wrong or there's extreme weather. Often this is the type of work that is somewhat specialist, which in Gurrunkeedle, which in areas other than Gurrunkeedle, you'd bring in a specialist. But Gurrunkeedle is too remote. There isn't this sort of formal sector. So you do it yourself. In fact, almost everything in Gurrunkeedle is informal. But the food that you can produce in Gurrunkeedle has very limited value. So whilst there's a point in feeding yourself, there's little point in working harder to boost productivity, because you'll get very little for it. However, people do work harder, often on cash crops or on making wind chimes or the raffia animals. But that's just to pay, I was going to say taxes, but I mean that in a broader sense. You have to pay in Indonesia for a whole host of government services. If only to get your new ID card or something like that. There's a cost associated to it, which of course, if you're engaged in subsistence farming, that's very difficult to come by. Then of course there are capital goods. There's capital goods like building materials, motorcycles and smartphones. And of course, as everything, including government services, is moving over to your smartphone, then this is becoming essential, even in a society like Gurrunkeedle, where you're lucky if you can get a signal for it. Dead industries. After after leaving academia, I started a number of knowledge-based companies. The primary market for these companies was regional and local arms of central government, as opposed to local government. Oh, I was going to say and regional government, but it did include regional government. With the global financial crisis, the entire market for what these companies did disappear. I likened it to me having a corner shop, and first of all, the factory that served the local community closed, but then they knocked down the housing estate that served the factory. So it went completely, the market totally disappeared. And of course I then had time on my hands, as I still do. I wouldn't be making this channel. But when I honestly asked myself, what good have I done? I realised I couldn't answer it positively. I mean, in the UK, there used to be a need for the public sector, I suppose it still exists, but it isn't like it was, to spend their budgets before the end of the financial year, or risk getting less in future years. So my business did research and consulting to use up these budgets prior to the year end. Now, maybe some of these projects could have looked at things that are useful. But as time went on, it became apparent to me that they were only fixing the problems created by the last policy direction. So we seem to go from thesis, antithesis, synthesis throughout that cycle, on and on, just repeating nearly the same mistakes every time. It would be tempting to argue that this is common only in the public sectors, but I'd argue that in the private sector it could be even worse, because there are so many things that happen in the private sector that are of no value whatsoever to humanity and are maybe even engaged in harming society. Immediately I think of the PR industry, advertising, pornography, tobacco, but I think if we really look at most industries, you'll find that most of them could be included. We're told that within financial intermediation facilitates production. I don't suppose many of you studied O-level commerce as I did, but we're told that financial services facilitate the productive industries. But nowadays, 90% of the product of financial intermediation is consumed by others engaged in financial intermediation. In other words, it's non-productive money chasing non-productive money, something which is considered haram to us Muslims. Of course, there could be productive jobs in non-productive industries, but what that means is that they too make no contribution to society and mankind. Dead economies. Certainly the health crisis got me thinking about whole economies, especially that of the UK. Firstly, I think we have to question GDP. I mean, what on earth is GDP? It was an emergency measure brought in during World War I. And like all emergency measures, including those connected to the health crisis, it'll never be rescinded. But it only really measures at best it measures productivity. But the UK, along with much of the West, is now completely service-based. It's a nonsense, How do you measure the productivity of education and health unless you privatise them? Which, of course, does seem to be a current agenda. And furthermore, it doesn't include subsistence farming, housework, the informal economy, areas which are vital in places like Gunung Kidul and indeed most of Indonesia. David Graeber states that most work doesn't produce anything. Most labour is about keeping things the same and not creating something new. So they're about caring, cleaning, repairing things that are done around the house. Isn't it paradoxical that I've argued that care has been cut off from health because of health can be seen as productive? You can charge for pharmaceuticals and machines that go bing in the corner. But how do you really put a value on care? And I think I precipitated this in my third book, The Londo and the Green Queen's Revenge. I said all of the UK's biggest industries are either involved in deception or selling false hope. Public services, which are based on the creation of the illusion of scarcity and fear. Financial services, so much of which is devoted to money laundering. The drug industry, including brewing, spirits and tobacco. The sex industry in its widest possible definition. The arms industry, military and security industries, and cosmetic and fashion industries. Of course, I could continue. What of the arts and entertainment? Even the food industry is tainted by producing products which fail to satisfy our dietary needs. But then maybe the same applies across the world's economies. How much of our endeavour is actually devoted to supplying our actual needs? It seems to me that we've allowed human endeavour to be diverted to manufacturing false desires and in fulfilling and the fulfilling of them, or at least fleetingly and partially. Nevertheless, I've commented for the last 10 years, every business deal that I've been engaged in has been fraudulent. I hasten to add, never intentionally from my part, and the perpetrators have also normally been British. Also, to my amazement, I find the UK pound to be the most counterfeited currency in the world. So maybe deception and fraud at the highest level permeate and destroy all levels of society. Certainly I've concluded this about Indonesia long ago. Why would the UK be any different? Should I be surprised? Not if I'd given any thought to it. After all, the UK killed 50,000 to protect the rights to deal in hard drugs. Whilst it was the world's first secret police and external agents as intelligence services were created by Rosicrucian and occultist Elizabethans. Then what has the health crisis taught us about the pharmaceutical industry? And as I've argued that the media and education are simply hegemony to get us to accept the unequal distribution of resources. Indeed, isn't economics pure hegemony? Does this explain the spate of recent suicides amongst prominent economists? That they suddenly realised that their working lives have been a sham? As indeed I have, and certainly I am what some would believe is an economist. Maybe I'm being too harsh. But should we not ask, do we really need these industries? And what could we actually be doing if we rearrange things around their contribution to mankind? AI and robotics are expected to replace around 50% of all jobs very, very soon. I mean, I've seen different dates quoted for this. The end of this decade is indeed possible, but it's very, very soon. Now, if we conclude that 50% of all jobs are dead jobs, then that is only going to leave 25% of us able to do meaningful work, which is probably an overestimation. If we also say that 39%, only 39% of our time is productive, then you get into a figure of somewhere round about 10%. 10% of all our endeavour could be described as meaningful. Does that mean that 90% of us lose our jobs? It could do. It could do. That's the way it's going. Or could we get away with working half a day a week? We've printed so much fiat money that markets no longer reflect productivity or even future. potential productivity and expectations. All this fiat money is doing, this massive fiat money, is inflating share prices and thereby increasing directors' wealth. But at the same time, we're being told that we need to raise taxes, as we cannot simply print money to help out those in need, because this would be inflationary. And yet, share prices being unnaturally inflated isn't inflationary. And this is the hegemony I speak of, so that we accept that it's okay to print money for directors to become wealthy, but cannot do to lift the needy out of need. As we move to the metaverse, the media will control the rules of accumulation. In other words, spending and making money is a product of the metaverse itself. So the metaverse will define who should have resources and who should not, how many they should have, how many they shouldn't, etc., etc. Inevitably, this means that resources will become more and more concentrated in the hands of the few, as if it wasn't already. But isn't that the whole point? I'm sure that, like David Graeber, you'll want to tell me about your own BS jobs, and please do in the comments section. But what I'm really saying is that we've all lived BS lives in a BS world. Everything you've been told, everything you believe, is designed to prevent you from finding God. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed this vlog, and that, not only got something out of it, but provoked thoughts. I'm not here to push my beliefs, my thoughts on you, only to open up your own thinking, get you thinking about the world and life. When I started The Real Magic of Java, I believed that I'd only release them every month or maybe every 2 months. But now I find myself adding to this subsection once or twice a week. But please subscribe and hit the bell to get notifications for when I add new parts to this subsection. In part, the reason why I'm doing it more often is that the concept has moved from filming rituals and events that took place in Java to me also describing my beliefs and philosophy. And that does come in response to people expressing an interest in it. But of course, me actually seeing rituals and events really doesn't happen so often. What I would say to you is that there's no attempt at subterfuge on my behalf. And when I do experience rituals, I will include them for you to see. And as I say, there's no way I'm trying to mislead you. And if I believe there is subterfuge, if I uncover it, I will point it out to you. I'm trying to be as honest as I can be. Now, please make comments, please ask questions, and I'll try to be as honest and open with you as I can be. Of course, there will be some of you who disagree with me, particularly when I talk in terms of my own beliefs, my own feelings. And, you're welcome to alternative feelings, and we can agree to disagree. Sometimes I find that people on YouTube can be unnecessarily attacking and aggressive, and at times I don't restrain myself enough, and I apologise, but it's not my intention to put anybody down, I know what I talk about can be emotive, and it can be challenging to your beliefs, but I'd love to enter an open discussion, a heartfelt discussion, but unfortunately I often come across things that are Oh, especially when people quote the scriptures to me. I've just no idea where it takes us, you know. Because I'm speaking from the heart, you know. I mean, you know, sorry. If you want to quote the scriptures at me, do so. But it doesn't have much impact on me, you know. I personally have no desire to impose my feelings on you. And I suppose when people try to do it to me, it washes off, you know. All I'm trying to do is I'm trying to share my feelings with you, and I'd love an open discussion on feelings. I really would love it, you know. And sorry if I don't always react as best I should. I try and cure this in myself, but I think this is part of the sort of narcissism of social media that I talk about so much in this subsection. So look, if you've enjoyed it, I really urge you to listen to other sections on this channel, particularly the 4 audio books that I've uploaded onto this channel. Yes, they are in a novel format, they are novels, but they go into much greater depth than my thoughts and feelings. Now, what I would say to you is these are sequential, so my thoughts and feelings develop as we go through each chapter and each book. So it does begin with 1.1, the Chinese cemetery. But, you know, hey, it's up to you. Feel free to dip in as you wish, as you want. And, you know, really heartfelt thanks for listening to this. And I really want to say a great big thank you, and God bless you.